Experts in the Wire is sponsored by BuzzSumo, and today I'm going to teach you how to use BuzzSumo to find content competitors that you can then outrank in Google. So make sure to listen to BuzzSumo's spot on today's show. And with that, let's get into episode 80 of Experts on the Wire.
This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer?
Experts in the Wire, episode 80. Dana DiTomaso. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 80 of Experts in the Wire. My guest today was referred by Marie Haynes, who you may or may not have heard on this show, episodes number 1 and 73. And as you may know, I take extreme care in researching and vetting all of my guests here at Experts in the Wire. Dana, when I checked out a few of your past videos and interviews, I was very impressed, specifically by your interview on the edge of the web. I can tell when somebody really knows their stuff by how well they respond to questions like off the cuff, and nothing caught you off guard. So that's the type of person I love to interview because frankly, it really makes my job a little easier because I know I can kind of relax a little bit. But also the type of person I really like to welcome on the show because I know you're going to deliver a lot of value and insight for the guests as well. So Dana, I'm just going to jump right in and introduce you. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. How about you?
I am excellent. So I want to jump in with a little bit of your background. And if you don't mind, right in your profile, it begins with, it says you were born in a steel mill. And I was like, I can't skip over that. So if you wouldn't mind, do us the favor of explaining what that is all about.
My business partner, Jen, put that in. What it means is I'm originally from Hamilton, Ontario, which it's known as the Steel City. It's essentially the Pittsburgh of Canada. And my entire family work in steel. I escaped into the world of digital marketing, but that's certainly what Hamilton is known for.
Okay, good. So you weren't literally born in a steel mill then?
No, but pretty close, actually. It wasn't very far. You can see the steel mills from the hospital where I was born.
That is funny. And in researching you, I found you work in a ton of areas. You've talked about everything from PPC to branding to local SEO. Something I struggle with a little bit is not knowing how to describe myself I'm fearful that I don't present one core focus, if you will. So people sometimes might pass me up to invite me to speak at a conference or to guest post or something like that. How do you view yourself or describe yourself? Do you kind of put forward one core skill that you have, or how do you describe what it is exactly that you do and specialize in?
Yeah, and I think the reason why I speak about so many different topics is because we have a big depth of knowledge here at Kickpoint. And so when I'm speaking, it's something that we've been working on here at the office. And so it could be several other people, and I'm the person who gets up on stage and talks about it, right? And I think a lot of people miss that. When they hear a speaker speak, they think you personally did that. But when people speak and they're representing an agency, that's the agency's work. It isn't necessarily that they're, a whiz at this particular thing. And I think that that's something that we really try to bring here from Kickpoint is that depth of experience across multiple roles and disciplines. And that's why in-house we have 2 designers, 2 developers, 2 digital strategists, and myself and my business partner who do a little bit of everything. And really what we do with clients, and the reason why we're across so many disciplines, is we teach clients how to take or keep their digital marketing themselves in-house. So some of our clients are small clients who just need a little bit of help with local SEO, which is really the field in which we did start. And back when we met in MozCon 2012, that's what I talked about, actually, was local SEO. But certainly beyond that, there's larger organizations who have a few marketing people, and they're still paying a digital marketing agency when they could learn how to do this themselves. So our role is to be the experts, the strategists, to decide what needs to be done and by who. And then we teach them and we train them and we coach them on how to do those pieces, because we know it isn't rocket science. So a big part of our job is just keeping up on what's going on.
Right.
So that's where we come in and teaching the clients hey, there's this mobile first index coming out, or we really need to move your website to HTTPS, or here's a Google Posts feature now on Google on business pages. Here's how to use it. And so that's where our role is, to help our clients be better on all facets of digital marketing.
I think I first remember you coming across my radar as an expert in local SEO. So is that how you personally identify like one of your core skills or strengths, or has it sort of grown from there? Like, how would you identify with your core skills and strengths?
Yeah, I mean, me personally, certainly a lot of my experience is in local SEO, and it's something that I personally keep up on quite a lot still. I would say that my personal interests are in local SEO and a lot of reporting and data management, actually. And so I just did a presentation at Call to Action Conference in Vancouver on Google Data Studio. And I was reading the feedback, and it was really interesting. It went from, this is so far over my head, to I'm just started learning about Data Studio, so this is an interesting way to get started. But not a lot of people in the audience had heard about Data Studio or considered that. And often when we're working with clients, what they run into is really crappy reporting, where it's just they have to do it manually. They don't know that these APIs exist or that there's these really cool automated reporting tools. And what we say to clients is, our job is insights, not data. So getting the data is the part you put the time in. But once you have it, you need to be able to draw the insights. And that's a lot of where my particular passion lies, is in better reporting.
Oh, that is very interesting. I almost want to ask you all these side questions about the Data Studio, because I know very little about that, but I want to stay on track here. So when you got your first few speaking opportunities, did you feel as if it was because of a core skill like local SEO, or how did those come about for you?
Yeah, so my first speaking engagement in the industry, so actually I'll back up even further. I used to work in software, so I have a degree in geography. I was going to be rehabilitating damaged rivers for a living, and I actually ended up getting a job in software. And it was for a company that made environmental management software. So big companies like Pillsbury have to report to the EPA on their emissions, and this software automated that process. And I did software training. I started out in tech support, and then I moved to software training. I went to another software company, did software training. And then I got laid off from the second company 17 years ago, and used my severance to teach myself web design. And it was for very small local clients back in 2001. And that's where I started thinking about local SEO. So well before even AdWords was out, thinking about how do you get a local business to rank.
Interesting.
And back then it was easier than it is now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it was a different way of doing it. And so certainly my experience in this has been a long, in-depth process. So then, fast forward, moving to Edmonton, starting Kickpoint, and Matt McGee was looking for speakers for SMX West. And I checked out his site, and he had this really great how-to pitch. And it's funny because I'd known a lot of these people through social media for a long time. I actually met Rand Fishkin back at SES Toronto, 2004.
2004.
And, I'd known all these people from, because that was the first real industry conference I attended. And it was because Jill Whalen, if you remember her, gave me a pass to go.
Yep.
So she's the one who got me to my first conference. So then this was SMX West 2012, and so Matt had a thing on his site on how to pitch and how to, so I did, and I got into a panel on local SEO, and then people saw me speak there, and then I was asked to speak at a bunch of different stuff, and MozCon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just all rolled down from there.
That is great. So it was really that one event that kind of kicked everything off. Speaking of the
when Matt announced he was retiring from Third Door, I actually tweeted and said, it was you who got me into industry speaking roles, because he accepted my pitch at that first conference.
Wow. So let's circle to Kickpoint for a moment. You hinted at a little bit what services that Kickpoint provides. Paint that picture a little bit. So you really do end-to-end like web services. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. So we do branding, websites, marketing, strategies, assist with implementation. And really, we do try to be very broad because clients have different needs. Some clients just need help being better on social media, and they're happy with their website. Or some clients feel like they've got a good in-house team, but their website's a tire fire and they need help getting that fixed up. Or everything is wrong and they don't know what they need, and so they come to us to try to sort that out. So that's why we do try to be quite broad in that aspect, so that we're able to serve clients in a number of different ways. But our biggest focus is on education training and teaching in-house companies how to do it themselves. And a lot of these companies are working with a client right now who they came to us originally because their previous SEO company was sprinkling what was SEO magic fairy dust on their blog posts. And they're like, we need to keep this up. We don't want to work with that old agency. And we looked at it and we're like, actually, we can teach you how to do this. And they were getting totally useless audits once a month from the agency, which just automated, here's all the problems with their website, but it wasn't actually actionable, or they weren't able to do anything with it anyway, right?
Yeah, I think I've seen a few of those.
Yeah, and so you end up with that kind of situation. They've got a team of 7 people in-house, they can do this themselves. They can learn how to do it. And so that's what we're going through the process right now, to teach them how to do this themselves. And really it's the teaching, but then also the confidence that you can actually do this.
And how big is your team at Kickpoint?
There's 8 of us.
How do you balance not feeling spread too thin across all these different skills, social and PPC and branding and all this stuff, and feeling as if you're delivering enough value in all of those different areas that you might try to cover?
Yeah, and I mean, this is really where the experience as a team comes in, and having the expertise in-house. So people have their own specific things that they focus on mostly. So Natalie, for example, is our SEO strategist, and that's her big thing, is technical audits and the SEO pieces. Whereas Brittany does a lot of work with audience research and strategies, and she's an AdWords wizard, right? So that's how the two strategists split their skills separately. And I mean, the designers, Emma and Sarah have their design skills, and AJ and Tammy do things with code that I don't quite know how they work, but it's great.
I see. So you actually have, each person sort of has a core specialty or two that they focus on. On your homepage, it says you create websites not just to win design awards. And I like that. Are you actually finding and seeing, and this is something I should have even just been aware of, are a lot of design agencies actually creating websites with their interests in mind and not the clients to win an award? Do you see that out there a lot?
Oh, all the time. And actually, we wrote that after working with a specific client who had a website from a company that won a bunch of design awards. And when it launched, it lost 70% of their organic traffic.
Wow.
But it won awards because it wasn't a results-based award. It was a pretty-based award.
Right. Objective,
and a lot
aesthetic.
of these advertising awards it's like that. It has nothing to do with the actual reality of how well it served the client. It has more to do with the designer doing something cool for the sake of doing something cool. And a lot of web designers, they don't know about SEO. It's not part of their tool set. They don't think about it. And a lot of companies, you get a phone call from a company saying, yeah, we're just about to launch our website. We decided to talk to an SEO person. Be like, this is not the right time for you to call us. You should have called us well ago. So that's part of the reason why we have design in-house now, is to really help be that total solution for clients when it comes to web design. So they don't feel like they have to work with 2 different agencies. They can just work with one.
I can think of a few situations where that would have been helpful, where it's really hard to move the needle because the dev company or design company is a huge roadblock to that. So that's a very smart way to organize your business. Just so the listeners know what's coming, I want to chat about providing SEO a little bit in forms of consulting and agency work. We want to chat a little bit about local SEO, and then talk a little bit about treating different visitors differently across your different online platforms, which you gave a great presentation about. But first, let's jump into providing SEO and even all digital forms of marketing, but a lot of the audience here is SEO. You mentioned on the edge of the web that you're still seeing a lot of misunderstandings in the business world about SEO and online marketing in general. What sort of misunderstandings are you seeing out there today?
That it's cheap or fast or easy. It can be if no one else is trying for the same keywords as you. And a lot of it too is that people don't think about how much it touches, that it involves your website, that it involves your reputation, that you actually have to talk to people to get links. There isn't some sort of magical link machine you turn on and then links pour out the other end. And I think a lot of what's missing is people think that they'll buy a tool and the tool will magically solve their problems, but you have to put in the work.
Yes.
I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions of SEO, is just sitting there and putting in the time. And especially when you read blog posts, people talk about, we had this big win with this link campaign, but they don't talk about the number of hours that it took to build the asset that made the link campaign easier than it should have been.
Yes. I also feel like
that a lot of that is missing from case studies in particular.
I get the sense a lot of people, and I do this too. I mean, I think it's human nature, but we have selection bias where you can look at something in hindsight and say, oh, look at that, we generated all these links or all this traffic, and then come up with, oh, we had this big strategy, right? When maybe it's just the law of percentages, and maybe you just won that time, but you lost 10 other times, right? Do you see the law too as selection bias, where people are just picking out the times when they won?
Absolutely.
And ignoring
Nobody likes to think about the times they failed horribly.
Yeah.
That's not a favorite.
Why do you think people still believe that these weird tricks are out there that will help save them?
go on Twitter and look hashtag SEO, right? It's, the 7 weird tricks the experts don't want you to know about how to rank well, or even, Neil Patel's website, for example, right? That's all. There was a recent post about why not to go secure. Like, okay, that's maybe not a good idea.
Interesting. Do you deal with scope creep with clients at all, or in the past perhaps? And what are some things that you do to mitigate against that? It's something I deal with all the time. You do a 2-month project. They come back 2 weeks later. Just today, somebody emailed me a few weeks later. Hey, can I give you a quick call? I have some questions. How do you deal with things like that in terms of scope creep?
Yeah, well, a lot of it is because the clients actually do the implementation of the work, where we provide that coaching and training role. So it is a little bit more well delineated between who does what. But you really do have to set those expectations out in advance. And I mean, scope creep happens, right? So build contingencies into the quotes that you put in there. And if you bill hourly, be honest about your hours. It's that's part of it too, is really thinking about, like, is it time to cut this off with this client? And it's really, it's easy to give favors in the beginning because you think, oh, they're a great client. I just want to do this one thing for them. And then you've given 30 favors and now you're in trouble financially. So I think it's really important to be able to set those boundaries as early as possible.
I agree with that. So how do you deal with clients? I know you mentioned wanting to deliver education and empower your clients to do things internally. How do you handle clients who won't kind of get unstuck, or they just can't seem to take action and take the next step? So in other words, like, how do you help affect that change within the company?
Yeah, a lot of it is trying to bug them regularly about the work that they have to do. With our clients, we have, we call them action item spreadsheets, and it's a list of to-do items essentially that they have to do and we have to do, and there's responsibilities and dates and everything else. And then when we get into that implementation phase, really scheduling regular calls with clients. And so we both have accountability dates on when we have to do things. And sometimes clients are really honest. We had one client say, you know what, things have been really busy. I've had these projects that I wasn't expecting. So all these dates are going to have to get moved. And that's fine. It's your marketing, so you choose when you're going to do it.
Right.
And it's like, if you want us to take care of this piece because you can't do it, we can certainly do that, but then we'll charge for that. And so that also helps manage the scope creep, is really setting those responsibilities. It's right there in the spreadsheet, and it's a shared Google spreadsheet, so they can update it, we can update it. It's really clear and collaborative.
You also mentioned, I think, on the edge of the web, that you help tell people what not to do, what channel not to use. How do you distinguish between it just being a bad channel versus their bad execution, or maybe just not being patient enough?
A lot of it is research. So thinking about audience research, and that's a really crucial step to start any project with, is who's your audience. Sometimes with some clients, one client, they thought they should be on Twitter, but it turns out their audience signed up for Twitter, was on it for a few months, and then haven't been updating it in years. Right. So have a Twitter account, on the Twitter account, say, find us on Facebook, here's the link, but don't worry about updating that channel. And really for that, it was just the audience research. Instead of saying, oh, we're not tweeting enough, or it's not the right frequency, it's like, no, your audience is literally not here. Just abandon ship on that particular channel. Or even thinking about the competitive landscape and the competitive analysis. And this is a tool that I think, I don't know if you know Stat Search Analytics. But Rob and his team have built an amazing tool. And one of the things that's really useful in Stat is the share of voice metric. And so being able to see right away how much share of voice a client controls, and then who the big players are in that keyword space. Do you have any chance in beating them? What kind of debt have you built up essentially by not continuing your link building campaign? If you can't make up on it, then we'll focus on these few keywords, but it looks like you're going to be investing in AdWords, for example.
That's a good tool. Rob was on this show a little while ago. We didn't talk much about Stat. We talked a lot about featured snippets, but I'll dig up his episode and put it in the show notes. So I want to chat a little bit about local SEO. I found some slides that you used for Search Love Boston. They looked amazing. I couldn't make it to Search Love, so I'm sad that I missed the presentation, but the slides look great. First of all, I want to mention that we're not going to cover everything in these slides, but for the listeners out there, I will put them in the show notes. And also, for anyone out there thinking, I don't have a local business, all these concepts apply to all businesses, whether you're local or national or global, all of these principles. So everyone should definitely tune in and pay attention to these tips here. So first, I want to set the context. Why, in the talk here, in the slides, you mentioned that local SEO is about engagement now. So can you help sort of set the context of what that is all about?
Yeah, so local SEO is rife with spam because it's not as sophisticated as Google's other algorithms, such as the regular search algorithm. So it is quite easy to game the system, and a lot of spammers have taken advantage of that. So really, Google is moving to a focus on engagement because engagement is much harder to fake than it is, say, citations, right? I mean, there's a base level of everything you have to do to rank in local. You need to have write an app, you need to have a Google My Business page, you got to have your citations, right? I mean, Whitespark has a great checklist on what you need to do. But beyond that, what do you do to prove that you're a really good business that people should check out? And that's engagement.
So what are some of these engagement factors? I know you list a bunch of what those things might be that people actually do on their mobile device.
Yeah.
In relation to local businesses. So what are a few examples of those?
Yeah, so one of the biggest ones, and this is my opinion, none of this has actually been proven yet because we think that Google's rolling it out to be more and more the algorithm. But I think one of the biggest things is you're on your phone, you search for, say, Italian restaurant, you find one that you like, you tap on, get directions, and then you actually get in your car or you walk to the restaurant, and then you go to the restaurant and you're there for at least an hour having dinner. That is the best engagement signal you can get. And an even better engagement signal is you leave a review for the restaurant afterwards. Right. And you can see Google doing this more and more on Android devices with the, hey, were you at this place? Would you leave some tips so other people can decide if they want to go? Do you want to leave a review? Like really trying to push that contributor score system, where you get points for contributing. And now you can leave videos too and ask questions. And I'm sure none of that's going to go badly. But in general, that kind of engagement is really key for these businesses. And that's enormously difficult to fake. Sure, 1,000 people can tap on driving directions, right? And pretend that their IP is in your local city. But unless their phone goes from point A to point B and you actually are there, until you can fake that, which I imagine eventually they will be and Google will move on to something else. But for right now, that's a real engagement signal.
So are you thinking these signals here are actually impacting rankings in map results, in local organic results? Where do you think we're seeing the impact of these?
I think we're going to see it in map results, and I think we're going to start seeing it in Google now as it expands out to different areas. So where people are saying, I'm not going to say the keyword because my phone will turn on, but the Google keyword, ask your phone, where should I go for dinner tonight? And what's going to happen as a result of that? And how is it going to make those recommendations? And I think that is a lot of that's part of the algo that isn't necessarily 3-pack or search or paid or anything. Like that is the featured snippet stuff that Rob Bucci was talking about. It's outside of these things.
And you've got some really cool screenshots here. What sort of data does Google have access to, and what sort of things do they know about you besides, hey, you went to this restaurant and you were there for an hour? What are some of those examples?
Yeah, I mean, they have your email account, right? So you have a Google account that you use, particularly if you're on Android, you sign into your phone with your Google account. So Google has your email, they have your calendar, for example. If you visit websites, they're chasing you around to these different websites, right? So they know a great deal about you. And there was a really interesting study that was done a couple of years ago that Will Critchlow from Distilled shared with me. And if 3 distinct data points that somebody went to, you could figure out who they were with a high degree of accuracy, because everybody's patterns are so unique in the places that they go. Right. And even thinking about, for example, like let's say you and your partner commute into the city every day to go to work. And maybe you both commute in on the train. So you start at your house, you both commute on the train, you get off at the same stop, you go to a coffee shop together, and then, your partner goes one way to work and you go to another. Well, 2 of those data points are unique, but the third one is the workplace. And so that's the differentiator. Right.
Interesting.
And so that's something to think about is what are the unique data points that drive your engagement versus somebody else's engagement? And really, I mean, this is all part of Google's mission to provide a strong user experience. So why wouldn't Google want as much engagement data as possible so they could drive a better experience for you?
You have a slide.
Therefore more ads.
That's right. Make more money. You have a slide that says the knowledge panel is your engagement health check.
Yes.
So can you break that down a little bit for local businesses, maybe even non-local businesses? How can they utilize the knowledge panel to make a health check on their site and on their business?
Yeah, so if you Google your business name, do you have a knowledge panel? If you don't, well, that's a bad sign.
Yeah.
Let's start there. Like, you're dead, so you need a knowledge panel. Then you get a knowledge panel. When you start with a knowledge panel, it is usually quite basic. You've got the name, maybe you have some photos, maybe you don't even have a business page claimed yet, right? You might not have the hours of operation of the website. So the more information that shows up in that knowledge panel, the more data Google has about your business. And the reason why Google's showing more is because people are asking or providing that kind of information. So that's a health check in the sense that enough people are coming to this thing that Google feels like they should be providing this level of information. And really the gold standard of a knowledge panel is when you get the hours that something is busy. That's when you know that you've arrived essentially when it comes to knowledge panel, because you have enough people there that Google feels are important. And then the actual pinnacle is you have the hours in which something's busy and they have live updates showing you exactly how busy it is at that time.
Oh, wow. Because they see that place as being so popular and active that they are going to deliver that.
But there's enough people there with phones that have given Google permission that they can report back to the mothership and say, this is how many people are here right now.
I see. This might be a big old can of worms, but number one, how can people get the knowledge panel if they don't have it? And number two, well, let's start with number one, because I forgot number two, just being honest. I had two questions I forgot. Let's start with one. How can people go from no knowledge panel to knowledge panel?
Register Google My Business. Just start there. Google your business. If nothing comes up, then Google has no idea who you are. So you got to start with that Google My Business. If, let's say, you have a home-based business, and that's where you can do a service area business, for example, where you go to people's houses. And, if you have a home-based business, you don't have a service area business, at some point you're going to have to make a decision saying, do I want to put an address on here? Do I want to, rent an office space or something like that? The difficulty is with those communal office spaces, you don't want to put in a UPS store address. That's against the terms of service. Don't do that. But certainly things like co-working spaces. I mean, Kickpoint started in a co-working space. It's a totally legitimate, real business address. But that's really the key, is that you have a name, you have an address, and you have a phone, and it's unique to you specifically.
You have a slide here, slide 41. It starts to talk about what to monitor. You have clicks to website, number of reviews, etc. Now, of course, I didn't see the presentation, so I'm curious what you're referring to in this slide here, and maybe this moves to things that are action items that people can start to do to improve these things for their site.
Yeah, so on the very last slide of the presentation, I have a link to a spreadsheet that people can grab and actually start to recognize some of the stuff. So I say, here's how to track these different pieces, because there's no one tool, of course, that tracks all of this kind of data. And really some of it just, you have to do this manually. There's no actual tool to track it yet, like the health of your knowledge panel.
Right.
So this is to get people started with, these are the things I want you to keep an eye on, and here's how to track that.
I see. So you're basically saying people should be monitoring and tracking if busy times are being showed, the number of review sources. Is that what you're saying here?
Number of review sources and diversity of review sources as well. So if all your reviews are on one site, that's not as good as having, if you had the same number of reviews but spread out across 3 sites, for example.
So review diversity is really the goal.
Yep.
Let's chat about reviews for just one moment. Review acquisition. We all know that Yelp and Google, they hate you soliciting reviews. So what recommendations do you make to companies when they're trying to get more reviews?
Well, with Yelp, you definitely can't ask for reviews. You can just have a helpful link to Yelp on the website. If someone is so moved, then they can go and leave a review.
Yeah.
With Google, you can say, leave us a review on Google. They're okay with that.
Oh, okay.
And so what we generally recommend to clients is there's a few great review tools out there. Personally, we use grade.us. There's Get 5 Stars, which is with Mike Blumenthal's tool. Is great. There are tons out there. I would recommend one of those 2 for sure. And they're just better for different kinds of businesses. So go through the features and pick which one is best for you. But either way, they help you set up a page where people can go, and then you have sort of a central clearinghouse of where people can go to leave reviews. You can also do review gating, where if people leave a 1 to 3 star review, you say thanks so much, and that's it. If it's a 4 or 5, they say thanks so much. Would you also like to leave this review on Google, for example? And so just asking for reviews is such an important thing. We had one client, a camera store chain here in Alberta. And they had terrible reviews because everyone was Googling their store name and then leaving bad reviews on the main store in downtown Edmonton instead of going to the actual store where they bought the camera. And so the main store had a review score of like 2.1, and none of the other stores had any reviews at all. And they never asked for good reviews. And it was as simple as setting up pages for each of the store locations and then printing out a postcard that said, leave us a review, and putting it in the bag. And slowly their review score is getting better. But the problem is that if you start off with bad reviews, it's not as simple as getting the same number of 5-star reviews, because to move that average, you essentially have to get 5 times as many good reviews to push it out of the doldrums. So don't wait to start a review strategy. Start it early, because you don't want to have a problem when you have a problem.
So really just asking is the best route to go.
And don't be shy. Ask for reviews.
Yeah.
If people have had a good time, they want to tell their friends. They may not just think about it.
You have a slide about setting up for Twitter mentions. I'm wondering if you talk about what we're doing here. This looks really cool, by the way. You have latitude entered, longitude, radius. What is that all about, and what are we monitoring for here?
Yeah, so this is Zapier. And so what we've done is I set up a Zap that looked at the 25-kilometer radius around our office here in downtown Edmonton and any mentions of the word pizza. And so it just pushed it to a Slack channel. And this could be really useful for any company to think about their keyword and their geography. And thinking about if I had a pizza place and people at the time are talking about how the Icelandic prime minister said that pineapple does not belong on pizza, which I totally agree with, by the way. And then be able to talk to these people and say, hey, because people were tweeting and saying, now I want pizza. Well, great, here's a coupon, right? Or even just listening to the conversations that are happening in your city. And that's also a big part of engagement, is listening, not just talking.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, that's a search that a lot of people could use in a non-local business as well as local. I love that tip there. So I'm going to link to those slides in the show notes. We're going to take a quick pause. I'm going to mention my sponsor, BuzzSumo. Dana, do you use BuzzSumo at all?
Yeah, we do. Actually, we love them.
Oh, you love, that's awesome. A couple times I've asked a guest, use BuzzSumo, and they're like, no. Makes an awkward situation.
No,
but
they're great.
Since you do use them and love them, I can do my little spiel, but think of maybe if you have something top of mind of a way that you like to use BuzzSumo, you could feel free to mention that. But what I wanted to talk about here in relation to my sponsor, BuzzSumo, was I've really integrated them into my process for finding what I call a content competitor to then put into SEMrush to find content opportunities. So I'm going to back up and explain. So in SEMrush, if you can enter a domain of somebody that is a content competitor, and all I mean by that is somebody that publishes the same type of content in your industry or your field, but is not necessarily a product or service competitor, that is often a great way to find content they've already published that might be old or low quality or out of date that you can do something new around. So it can be a very strategic way to find content that you can publish around to drive traffic. But one of the challenges I always had with this process was coming up with those domain names to begin with. Like, if I have a client in the camping space, where do I begin to find somebody that publishes content about camping? Well, that's where BuzzSumo came in as my solution for that. And just today I used that example. I went to BuzzSumo, I typed the word camping, I set it to filter for the last year. I found a random website I'd never heard of called Little Family Adventure. I think it's a blog run by a mom or something. It probably has a domain authority of 50 or so. And I plugged her domain then into SEMrush, and instantly I found the topic camping meal plan. And I said, that's great. That's awesome. I've used this method now, this process, BuzzSumo plus SEMrush, dozens and dozens of times, and it works like a charm. So I want everyone to go out there and check out BuzzSumo with the discount code DANSHURE, DANSHURE, for 30% off 3 months. It's a great deal. You'll save $75 and you get a chance to play with BuzzSumo and all their awesome features, including that one I just mentioned there. So Dana, I gave you a moment. Is there a way that you've been liking to use BuzzSumo?
Well, we used it in a couple of different ways. The way that you mentioned, that's actually really cool. I have not done it to that specific level. We don't use SEMrush. We use Ahrefs instead. Yeah. But it's still, similar output out of there. We use BuzzSumo a lot for audience research and looking up influencers, in particular, who should our client be following on different social networks that they may not be paying attention to. Because particularly when you're thinking about media, right? A lot of companies are obsessed with it. We got to get in the paper. Well, sometimes bloggers are the new newspaper, right? And this isn't necessarily to pay bloggers thousands of dollars to talk about the product, but just really to build a relationship with these people. And that's something that really BuzzSumo is really great at, where we can type in, who are all the people who are food reviewers in San Francisco and get a pretty detailed list back and be able to send that off to our client and say, here's your new friends on Twitter.
Oh, I love that. That's a really good one. How do you help clients genuinely and authentically build a relationship without the obvious, like the elephant in the room is they want something from that writer? So what are some tips or strategies that you use to like genuinely build a relationship versus just like, what can you give to me?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is paying attention, listening without saying anything. You follow these people, set them up on a list, and then really pay attention to the kinds of things that they're sharing. And I think that's something where they'll start following people and say, hey, can I show you this deal? Whereas maybe it'll take 6 months, maybe it'll take a year, but eventually this person, if you engage with them, if you talk to them, if you're not asking for anything, perhaps you will get something back in return. And I think it's a slower method, but it's a less frankly scuzzy method, and it's much more sustainable. And then you're building that long-term relationship that you really want, as opposed to a quick, someone wrote a blog post about me, I made sure it said sponsored for FTC rules, but nobody engaged with it because they don't believe it because it's sponsored, versus an actual genuine discussion of how good your business is.
Do you have your clients use personal accounts to do that or brand accounts? I often see it's a struggle with brand accounts to get people to even pay attention.
Yeah, it really depends on the client and what the fit is. So sometimes clients have somebody who is, comfortable with social media, say the president, and so they have a big personal following, for example. Other times it is the brand account. And part of what we do, actually, and if you look up my MozCon presentation from 3 years ago now, it was 2 years ago, social media user experience, or SMUX for short. And we talked a lot about what you need to do on social media to stand out, particularly for brand accounts. And that's something where brand accounts, they can be really generic and boring and not interesting, and using, a strong brand voice, which I talked about the year before that at MozCon, combined with SMUX can really help your social presence stand out from your competition. And people will remember you, which is really the biggest thing as a brand account. Don't be boring.
That's really great. And the funny thing is, all of that was the ad technically for BuzzSumo. And that's what I love about doing these native ads, is like we're just giving the listeners a lot of tips. I'd never thought about that specific for getting clients to follow people using BuzzSumo. So again, you can go to buzzsumo.com, DANSHURE, for the 30% off 3 months of BuzzSumo. Dana, I want to chat a little bit about another presentation that you gave entitled Not All Sessions Are Created Equal. I'll post the slides in the show notes. There is also, I believe, a link of you talking through this with somebody interviewed you on YouTube, and I'll point to that as well. So if you want to see Dana talking through the slides. But for the context of this podcast interview, can you set up what exactly was this talk about here?
Well, this was for Get Uplift, which was with Talia Wolf. And this was actually quite recent. It was part of her Get Uplift one-day session. And one of the things that we were talking about was the idea that a lot of clients or a lot of websites, you have three visitors, right? You have the people who are going to be your customer, the people who are never going to be your customer, and the people who are already your customer. And most marketing focuses on 1 and 2 and totally ignores the people who are existing customers. So how do you segment out those people, and how do you really make your customers feel valuable? And that was the big, and the audience for this particular talk is a lot of, say, the growth hacking audience, which is a lot of, say, software as a service businesses, and really thinking about the idea of reducing customer churn. So that was one of the focus items in the presentation.
And you had an interesting thought. You had an interesting thought about the term growth hacking that I think you also mentioned on Edge of the Web. Slight diversion. What are your thoughts on the term growth hacking versus just marketing?
It's just marketing without a strategy. And I'm going to get mad tweets from growth hackers now. I feel like there's a place for it in some businesses, but the idea is that you still have to have a strategy and you still have to think long term. And I just think philosophically, it's not something that I necessarily agree with in terms of the idea of growth hacking, in that it's hacking. It's not sustainable. You're fixing a problem, but like hacking with an app, you're creating technical debt that you're going to have to fix elsewhere, right? And so that's where a lot of this really comes in, is like, I did this one weird thing and I got YouTube subscriptions to go up by 700%. Well, great. Did that make you money, right? And thinking about it in terms of long-term sustainability and really what is the overall goal? Why are we even here doing this marketing?
In the presentation, you mentioned a piece of content about the worst songs that was created. Yes. What was that all about?
Well, when we first started the company, we were just fooling around with different blog post ideas, and someone who was working here at the time wrote a blog post where she listened to the 100 worst songs on Songza. Remember them before they got eaten up by Google?
Yes.
And reviewed it, and then it was on our website for a while, and then we ranked really well for the 100 worst songs, which is absolutely not the right kind of traffic that we should have coming to our website. So we deleted it, and our traffic went down, but our traffic was more targeted. And this can be where, if you focus on the idea of traffic for traffic's sake, you can have ridiculous traffic that is never going to make you money, but you're spending money on it because they're coming to your site and drawing your attention away from what's really going on.
I'm trying to locate a slide here about the tool Full Contact. Here it is.
Oh, yeah.
Slide 33.
The creepiest tool you'll ever use. That should be their new tagline.
Paint the picture of this tool here, and then I want to ask about what's happening on this slide.
Okay. So Full Contact, they have two different tools. They have a website where you upload your contacts, and then they tell you the social profiles of those contacts. They also have the API, which is what they call the in-person enrichment tool. And so you can enter in the email addresses that you have, say, of your newsletter subscribers. And if they're in the Full Contact database, they will return all the social profiles that they have, their clout score, all that sort of stuff. And so this is really useful for clients, particularly in Canada, because we have new anti-spam rules that are quite stringent about when you can email people. But if you have the email address, you can still check out this information, and then you can still follow them on social media. And this is where, again, going back to audience research, I feel like most of my answers are going back to that. It's so key. But the biggest part of this audience research is running your list of email addresses through Full Contact and seeing where do these people hang out. And then you can use a tool such as, BuzzSumo to say what kind of sites did they share? What are they engaging with? What are they talking about on social media? And this gives you some insights that you may not necessarily have. And frankly, most people don't know that this exists. They think that you just found them on social media because you're that good, not because you had a creepy tool to look them up.
So this slide here I'm looking at, it's a spreadsheet, and you've got status and then their name and then their location, Twitter. Is this the output of that report?
That's right. So you download the Excel spreadsheet from the website, you buy yourself an API key, which I think starts at $99 a month. And then you pop all your emails in there, hit go, come back a couple hours later, and you're all set.
And so this all goes back to the context of that third category of visitor. You're trying to basically learn more about who your actual existing customers are to deliver them more value.
What do they need? And this is the biggest thing. And sites like, Envision, the design software, they do a really good job of this because they write blog posts that are perfect for their audience. And frankly, it's because they pay attention. And a lot of companies, they sell you the product and they're like, okay, thanks. And they ride off into the sunset and are happy to keep taking your money, but they're not actually paying attention to what your needs might be beyond that particular tool. And your goal as a company should be to make your customers better. So how do you make your customers better? Well, by providing value beyond that actual sale. So thinking about what kinds of things are people sharing? How can I engage with them on social media? How can I make them feel more valued than just an invoice?
You mentioned another tool, which I love, but after you talked about it, I felt like I wasn't using it to its full capacity, and that tool is Nuzzel. So describe Nuzzel, and then how are you helping clients use this with this tool?
So Nuzzel is essentially a Twitter roll-up of all the interesting links that people have searched for. And it's really useful if you don't go on Twitter every minute of every day to see what was really trending on Twitter that day. I mean, most days my Nuzzel is full of Trump. But other than that, it's actually useful. It's SEO and Trump and sometimes Justin Trudeau stuff. That's essentially my life right now, but on Twitter. But for your clients, if you let's say you run your clients through Full Contact, you have their Twitter profiles, you follow them on Twitter, you add them to a list. Then on Nuzzel, you get the information from that list specifically. Now you know what's popular amongst your customer group. And so you can see the kinds of things that your customers are sharing. Yeah, and you don't have to pay attention to every link because Nuzzel aggregates it all for you.
It's such a great tool. On behalf of the entire U.S., we apologize for Trump. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm sorry.
I hear that a lot. And people are like, can you loan us Trudeau? They're like, no, you got to fix your own stuff. Sorry.
Yeah, that would be a dream come true. But Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate what you said here, because I didn't really quite picture what Nuzzel was until the first time I saw it. Like, so if I'm following 1,000 people, it's going to show me the link that most of those people have most shared, right? So like you said, it aggregates that. It's such a powerful tool. You also mentioned using brand searches to monitor just how well your brand is doing, and also auto-suggest. So how can people monitor their own brand searches? Is this a manual thing, or is there a more sort of automatic way they can do that?
This is where I would say use Stat Search Analytics. Put all your branded keywords in there and just keep an eye on it, because one of the things that Stat does really well is it does monitor things like snippets. And so you can see, for example, if you've got your business coupon codes, is there a snippet being returned? Is there another company showing up for coupon codes that should not be? You should be ranking for that. Don't let other people steal that from you.
And then you mentioned a really good one that I think a lot of people overlook is auto-suggest. Is there a way to monitor for that, or do you have to manually type your brand auto-suggest?
I'm sure Mike King probably has some sort of wizardry on scraping that. I mean, Uber Suggest isn't bad to suggest these things. There's also Answer the Public, which a lot of people know of as a keyword research tool, and that way you can use that as well.
I want to jump a little bit down. There were a lot of things you mentioned in this talk, but of course, for the sake of time, we can't cover everything. But something I had never heard of was data mine for phone calls. Explain what this is and how people can leverage that.
So we work with CallRail for call tracking, which is an excellent call tracking tool. If you're not using one, or if you're using one you don't like, I recommend checking them out. And one of the things that CallRail does is they have automatic transcripts of phone calls. Now, you have to check your local laws to make sure that you can actually record phone calls. You may have to say, this call is being recorded for quality assurance, blah, 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 blah. And then you can automatically transcript. And then a new feature that CallRail just came out with, I think it was only a month or two ago, is the ability to flag keywords that come up in these transcripts. So then you can see if there's, say, angry people. And I know eventually they're going to be doing more sophisticated sentiment analysis with it, which will be great to say if it's a positive call or a negative call. But this can be really useful if, for example, your team is using CallRail, you can tag calls as new clients or existing clients. Mm-hmm. And then you can say, okay, so if it's an existing client and they say the word mad, then I want to know immediately that happened, for example.
You say in the slides here, you are not in a war for customer attention. And then the next slide says, you don't need to surprise and delight. And so
you see so many big ad executives talking about this. I can't even remember what company this person worked at. It was like Procter & Gamble or something, somewhere ridiculously huge. And they said, we're in a war for customer attention. You have to surprise and delight your customers. Be like, no, you don't. Maybe Procter & Gamble is, but most companies are not. And it's not a war for customer attention. It's only a war if you've treated your customers badly and therefore they don't want to pay attention to you anymore. And They're paying attention to, say, BuzzFeed instead. Right. So you're not going to win against BuzzFeed. So what else are you going to do? And I mean, the surprise and delight thing, I feel like it's such a buzzword that's really come up in, say, web design circles about surprising and delighting people. And the example that I use is, the last thing you want to have when you're transferring money in your bank account is to be surprised and delighted. You just want it to work. Yeah. So if you're surprised that it worked and delighted that it worked, then maybe something is wrong with your UI, that it is a surprise that it worked. And you really have to consider that. Not every moment is a surprise and delight moment. Maybe you should just deliver on the brand promise that you've been promising all along.
I mean, the one company that phrase always reminds me of is Whole Foods, now Amazon, of course, because they use that, right?
You're surprised by the prices. I don't know if you're delighted, though. Although maybe now with Amazon, since this is day one and they already reduced a bunch of the prices, maybe you are delighted.
Yeah, who knows? So as I wrap up this topic here, just the idea of the 3 different visitors, any last takeaways for the listeners, like things that you want them to walk away with and maybe try on their site or try in their business that they can use to leverage this idea of not only aiming for the 1 and 2 who's could be your customer or never going to be your customer, but also the existing customer. Any last little action item that the listeners can think about here?
Yeah, I think consider the last time you picked up the phone and actually talked to a customer on the phone. The marketing team can get really isolated from sales, and sales has a certain spin on things, which is making commissions. So instead, pick up the phone and actually talk to your customers. Another thing to consider too is that if you've got poor engagement, maybe it's your content, but maybe it's how you're presenting it as well. And ask your customers about that. There's lots of questions you can ask your customers, including, we've published this blog post. Did you find it useful? It could even be down to that level. Consider setting up a customer advisory board, for example, where you ask customers their opinions on different things. And also consider, too, the idea of personas And really, one of the major things I talk about in this presentation is that personas are not just for before the sale. They're still people after the sale. They're still personas, but their goals may have changed. So how did that goal change after the sale? And how can you serve that persona as a customer, not just as a lead?
Yeah, you mentioned in the talk, there was a series of emails that you received. I believe somebody wanted you to do a survey.
Oh,
and
yeah.
If you could highlight what a few of the things were that they did wrong there, I think the audience would find that, if not useful, at least just amusing. So what were some of the mistakes they made?
Okay, so the domain name was not the domain name of the company. It was like a third-party survey website. I'd never heard from this person before. The language was really cold and totally different from the brand voice of how this company usually is. And they kept putting in subject lines like, final notice, you must fill out the survey, which final notice is not something you want to have for a nice, friendly customer survey where you're asking someone for a favor, which is really what a customer survey is.
Right.
And then they would say, just rate us on a scale of 1 to 10, which is also kind of a crap metric. Like it's either a thumbs up. We live in a thumbs up, thumbs down world. Don't bother with 1 to 10. But then also thinking about when I click this, it says it's a 5-minute survey, but you just want me to click 1 to 10, it feels like a trap.
Right.
So there's a lot of different issues with this email, and I never did actually fill it out. So
yeah,
I don't feel bad.
I think your point here is like that's being sent to an existing customer, but that gives you a very bad feeling and impression about that company. Doesn't that make you want to work with them less or buy their products less or their services less?
Oh, I've already started researching alternatives to this company. Absolutely.
Now, why do you think something like that happens? Is that like a weakness in their process? Something didn't get communicated from the top down? Like, how does that even happen where these like terrible emails get sent out?
I think a lot of it is just, okay, we got to do a customer survey, check. And this is where marketing really needs to try to be involved in as many levels as possible. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you're by yourself. You might be the only marketing person and operations is just, running off and doing their own things. Just try to insert yourself as much as you possibly can and give feedback as much as you can and be helpful. And slowly you will be able to build up that trust. And then you can say, okay, so maybe this is not the best way to do a customer survey. Why don't we try this or why don't we try that? And try to build the idea of testing into the culture that you're pushing through at the company.
You mentioned personas. I do want to just take one moment and dive into this a little bit. I know you're very passionate about this area of personas. And you have a really great article on Kickpoint, which I'll link to. But let's spend a few minutes here. So first of all, how would you define what a persona even is?
And see, this is a quiz because I don't have the article up right now, but a persona is something that's a person who's measurable. Certain unique attributes that are measurable and trackable. So you know the kind of people who are coming to your website who meet that certain criteria. So let's say, for example, you run a convention center, which is one of our clients, and one of their personas are wedding planners, right? That's a certain type of persona. And you can say, oh, well, Liz is a wedding planner. She's in her 40s, blah, blah, blah. But I don't care about that stuff. I want to know where she hangs out, what sites does she pay attention to, and how can we get her attention from these websites? And that's the measurable and trackable part.
You mentioned BuzzSumo in here. So you talk about building personas and you talk about investigating in social media. You mentioned full contact, etc. If somebody is struggling with building a persona, maybe walk us through that just a tiny bit. Like if you're starting from nowhere, like, I have done very little of this, for example. Maybe I do it intuitively, but I've never put it out on paper, right? So take somebody like me and walk me through the first few steps of what I might do to actually build a persona.
Yeah, so pick up the phone and call a customer and then start to find out some information about them and really pick your best customers to start with. And then think about how they fall into these different kind of customer groups. You really want to start with 3 to 5. You don't want to have more than that, especially when you're first starting out, or it'll be too overwhelming. And maybe you will overlook a couple of customer groups in the beginning, but that's okay. Focus on the ones that you know the best and you can put together the easiest. And so starting with calling somebody and saying, all right, so you're a small business owner, tell me the struggles that you have. Why did you choose to work with me, for example? And asking questions like that, like what blogs do you read? And so, for example, we'll get a lead and I'll say, where did you hear about us? And they say, oh, I was on the Moz recommended list. So that tells me something about this customer and that they know enough about SEO that they know that Moz exists.
Right.
And they were on their site. And if they say Moz or if they say Moz, sometimes we get that, then I know that they just Googled it. They don't actually know the company, for example. And so that really helps define their level of sophistication when it comes to SEO. And so then you can segment it into different pieces based on that and say, well, okay, so if they don't know anything about this, it's going to be a different kind of content I'm going to send, a different kind of presentation versus somebody who is already pretty sophisticated in these with SEO.
So I'm wondering how to take this from an idea or a concept and put it into action to be able to like test it, measure it, implement it, etc. Any quick tips on how to be able to do that?
Yeah, lots of custom segments in Google Analytics, actually. That's how we track a lot of stuff. So if you know that the customer journey that this person is going to take is going to involve page A and B, and another persona is going to be page B and C, you can set up those segments in Google Analytics. And I have screenshots in that blog post on how to do that with a real client example taken from a real client. And a report that we've built for them. And there's a link to download that report and create your own personas, create that report. And then you can see one of the things that we consider is if the conversion rate is quite good for that persona, then you're probably doing a good job of marketing to that persona. And even better, let's say you're doing paid marketing specifically to this persona. If you're looking at all traffic and you've got a conversion rate from paid, let's say 5%, and then you say, I only want to look at this one persona, and the conversion rate stays largely the same, that means that you're doing a really great job of targeting that persona.
So it's a really great way to segment your traffic then.
Yep.
I like that.
And then provide different things to different people. And I mean, advanced level, you get into personalization and everything else. But if you're just starting out, don't worry about that part yet.
I love it. So you mentioned a minute ago, like having the marketing department involved in other things like calling customers, etc. This definitely reminds me of cross-domain learnings. And one thing that I did a video and a post on earlier this year was the idea of branding in branded search results, but in the meta description. So I pull an example like Macy's.com has the worst meta description I think I've ever seen, right? But then there was another company, I forget the name off the top of my head, but you know, a lot of the usual players that you would expect had great branding like Slack and like MailChimp, right? ModCloth was the one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
You mentioned briefly, I believe, in one of your talks or one of your interviews about the idea of PPC and branding. So those are my thoughts on it from an SEO standpoint are like 2 million people or more are looking at the Macy's.com SERP a month, and that's giving them a branding impression. But what are your thoughts on the idea of PPC and branding?
Yeah, and I think brand voice can extend to multiple areas, including PPC. And really the example is that I've given in past talks is all Google auto insurance. And then I will grab the AdWords text and I will show 3 ads, say for, Geico and Progressive and State Farm. And then I will show the copy for their ads and no one can match it up because they are so generic. There's nothing that makes them stand out. And put your voice in there, inject your personality in there, because there's a reason why you have that personality. There's a reason why Progressive has chosen Flow. Well, not so much anymore, but it used to choose Flow. Is there the reason why Geico has the gecko, right? Like this is the kind of message that they want to send. So why would you abandon ship on that message when you're paying for search traffic?
So my thought here is like, is this something that you could put into PPC or even SEO to measure, or is it more just the principle of including your brand in every element that's touched?
A little bit of both, but the idea is that it's easier to convert people who are already excited about working with you. And there's a reason why you have that brand message to attract the people who you want and to discourage the people who you don't.
Right.
So in this case, you're going to get better leads in that funnel if they resonate with your brand message. So why not have it there as well? Why not try to get those better leads?
Yeah, I love that. As branding is like a filter for not only who you want, but who you don't want. That makes a ton of sense. So we're going to wrap things up in just a minute, but I wanted to ask real quick, I think you tweeted about you're learning R. Do I have that correct?
Yes, slowly.
Let's start with what is R, and then let's start with that, and then why learn this new thing?
Well, R is a statistics program, essentially. If you go to flowingdata.com, there's lots of really cool data visualizations on there that are driven using R. And so I just thought that they're really cool and I wanted to learn more about that. And frankly, I haven't learned a new programming language in a while. And I thought it would be nice to sit down and do some of that again. Because it's been a long time since I taught myself, PHP. So it's
very
time
cool.
to get back and do a programming language again.
I'll put that link in the show notes as well. So as we wrap things up, you mentioned keeping up with changes in SEO as well as doing that within Kickpoint. How do you do that? Are there certain people you follow, certain sites, certain Nuzzel, for example? How do you keep up with all the changes in SEO, especially because like every day Barry's tweeting something that sounds big and monumental, but it's actually no big deal at all. So how do you filter all that stuff out?
Well, Nuzzel helps because if Barry tweets something that is actually big and monumental, lots of people tweet it and then it gets picked up. And really, we use Slack here at Kickpoint, as most businesses do. And we have a channel in Slack and called Social All the Things. And people post stuff in there that they find interesting. So a lot of it is really just paying attention to that and seeing what kinds of cool stuff is coming up from all the different people here. And then also, Nuzzel is a big, big part of it, and seeing what kinds of things are being shared in there. And there are certainly some people in the industry who I do pay attention to on Twitter. And I really am interested in the kinds of things that they have to say. So I will go on and specifically search for them. Marie is one of them. She's great. And her newsletter is great, by the way. If people haven't signed up for it yet, you should.
Yeah, you definitely should. And of course, I'll put your Twitter in the show notes and people go look to see who you're following as well for some ideas. I'm always coming across new people. I can't keep up with it. But anyways, as I fade up the music here, Dana, tell us if you're going to be at any upcoming conferences, which I assume you will be, in case people are out there and they can meet you in person, and then also where they can find you online.
Well, in the fall, I'm actually doing a couple of non-search industry conferences. One of them is about magazines and talking about digital. Another one is for another industry conference. The next industry conference that I'm booked for and can talk about is Brighton SEO in April 2018. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say this yet, but I will be at Engage in Portland in March. So David said don't start promoting it yet, but if you're thinking about going to Engage, it's a great conference. Technically it's a regional conference, but the caliber of speakers is excellent. If MozCon feels a little too pricey for you, check out Engage. Plus Portland in February, what's better than that?
And only the real diehard, dedicated SEO fans and listeners are an hour into a podcast episode. So who knows how many people heard that there.
I know. David probably won't even know that I talked about it. David Mim is who I'm talking about.
David Mim, yeah. So, and then also, where can people find you online?
Well, my Twitter is Dana DiTomaso, and if you can spell that, you get a prize. There's only 2 Dana DiTomasos on the internet, so I'm not that hard to find. I'm the one who doesn't live in Colorado. And then kickpoint.ca. And we have a newsletter on our website. You can get to it by going under the contact tab. We send it out every Friday. It includes a little bit of what's happening at Kickpoint, 3 digital marketing articles of various disciplines that we found really interesting, a music pick from our design director, and something cute.
Something cute. You'll have to sign up to see what that something cute is. I love it. Okay, Dana, well, thank you so much for joining us on episode 80 of Experts in the Wire, and we'll see everyone next time. Thank you.
Thank you.